All right, looks like we're live. It's been a while since I've made a video. So, my name is Jay. I am the owner of Section8Consulting.com, and today we're a little bit ill prepared, but we're getting there. But the topic of today's video is going to be regarding Section 8 housing, federal funding, and this current administration and their plans and policies in place for the fiscal year of 2026. The news has done a fabulous job at this point of really homing in on all throwing out big numbers out there across the news about potential cuts and the loss of vouchers and other things. What I'd like to do today is we're going to source information directly from the White House, and we're going to discuss that and what's going to happen. But before I do that and give you an accurate picture of what's going to happen for this year and next year in terms of federal housing, vouchers, and so on, I'm going to do a few introductions. My name is Jay. I am the owner of Section8Consulting.com. As you can see, we've been in existence for about 25 years. We've helped roughly 22,000 people with housing and other issues. A few other things I'm going to mention before we get into this video. I do not want my video in this channel will not be used as a political platform or a religious platform, respectfully, okay? If you want to discuss issues related to funding and so on, that'd be fine. But we're not going to do political attacks and all that, okay? Comments related that way in this video will be removed and people will be blocked if that happens, especially if it's more mean-spirited. And one thing you'll love YouTube for is there's lots of people who love the troll. I'm not interested in doing that. We're just trying to get a realistic idea of funding and the programs. We're not here to debate what they do in Congress, okay? So I want to show you something real quick. Here is the actual funding. Now, I'm going to link it up for you guys as you can read along, but I want to show it to you. This is the Executive Office of President, Office of Management and Budget for D.C. Susan Collins, which is going to be the chair, okay? So if you ask me where do I get my information, I get it directly from the number one authority in the United States, and that would be the White House, okay? So we closed that factor out. I will not be trolled on that factor. I'm also going to provide a copy for you guys real quick so you can read along. You'll be joining me on page 25 because I advise you not to listen to the news. The news is not going to give you an accurate picture. In fact, most of what's being published across Google and across major news agencies is simply not true. So for 2026, let's discuss what's really going to happen and what you should expect for those of you that have a voucher, those seeking housing, those that are homeless and need housing, seniors, and so on. Let's talk about what's really going to be considered and done. And I want to make one thing very clear. This report indicates what the president is going to be asking Congress to consider. It does not mean this is going to happen. Lots of things can happen between now and next year, okay? None of this is written in stone. None of this is ultimately up to just the president. Congress has to pass this and approve it. And we all know how that works out. They'll argue back and forth across the floors, and maybe there'll be this will look different then. Okay, but the news loves to pump out fear, and that's what it's doing right now. So the first article of this is going to be cuts, reductions, and consolidations. And again, this is directly the plan given and issued by the White House. And I've linked it up if you'd like to follow along. Here's the big one that everybody's talking about across the news: 40% cuts. This budget empowers the White House, and this is what they're considering. They're going to consider asking Congress to do a 2-year cap on able-bodied adults. Let's give clarity to rules, policies, and people that could potentially qualify. If you are disabled or you're a senior, then you ignore this. It has nothing to do with you. It has nothing to do with your voucher, and it will have nothing to do with you getting a voucher, okay? Those cuts mean nothing. You don't even need to be present for this video, okay? You will not be affected. This is for able-bodied individuals. Now, let's discuss how that might work in a mixed household. Let's say we got grandma, grandpa, mom, dad, and children and grandchildren. If there's a single individual in the household that's disabled, you can leave this video. It will not affect you. And that respectively goes for those that are going to apply for a voucher or already have it. Okay. It only requires one individual in the home to be disabled. And so by virtue, those in the White House that designed this didn't think too carefully about this, because I can see lots of ways that many households could still get this, even if it were real. There's always ways around things. So 72 billion was the budget for 2025's physical budget for all HUD. Now, this White House is going through line by line through HUD and in this report, and they're going to cut 26 billion of the 72. Now, that's proposing that it isn't going to be a higher budget next year either. Okay. So I guess you could tabulate that might be 40%. But that 40% is really going to be the cut to those that are able-bodied. If you need a voucher on the principle that you're simply low income, you're the one that needs to be here for this video. If you're a senior, you're disabled, you have HUD or other issues, or a veteran, you don't need to be here. Okay. This is not going to affect you in any way. The 40% of the budget cut is specifically designed for people that are low income and they're going to need housing. So you guys are going to be the ones ultimately going to be affected by this if this even happens. And again, 40% of the budget, what's not clear about this in the news is they're not cutting 40% of the budget for vouchers. You see the clever deception of the news? This is a 40% cut across the board to all programs related in HUD. It doesn't specifically address just voucher. So let's talk about the actual cuts here and who that might affect. So the first up I see is 2.6 billion will be the actual cut to vouchers. Okay. And so if we look at the overall budget for vouchers, that's a negligible amount. 5%, where most of the cuts are happening or in other frivolous programs. If you watch earlier videos, I always wondered why we have so many housing authorities with people that get paid practically nothing to do their job at the housing authority, but yet you get such bad service, right? So let's talk about these additional programs and how they're going to cut. Here's where the real money is going to be cut. It won't be on the voucher plateau, okay? But term limits are a possibility, at least for the remaining 3 years that Mr. Trump would be in office, okay? So the Community Development Block Grant, they're going to cut 3.3 billion, okay? And so as they put it here, this is just a program that has been used to basically connect different grants to people. It has nothing to do with housing people. So I'm going to call, in my opinion, it can go. It serves no great purpose other than lining the pocket of housing authorities. The Home Investment Partnership Programs, that's another one that can go. 1.2 billion spent on that. That's another one that lines the pockets of housing authorities. Number 3, $500 million, Native American programs and Hawaii housing block grants. That's what we call underutilization. It's being allocated, but a lot of the people in Hawaii or in the tribal nations don't really use this that much. So they're cutting, in my opinion, $500 million, but that's a negligible amount considering how much actually is being put in that program to start with. So the effect won't be that big. Homeless Assistance Program, negative $0.5 billion. Now, you notice that this year for 2025, they killed the program altogether. I think it was 5.5 billion. It will be returning next year. That means that continuum of care, when they stopped it this year, that was 5.5 billion. They're only going to be cutting $500 million next year. That means that in about 6 months, those that are homeless and seeking housing and other issues will be able, even my office will be resuming services and actually preemptively. In other words, since we know the new federal budget is coming out for 2026, we could probably start around October working with clients in terms of getting this in anticipation of this funding, unless Congress makes a major change. So housing and continuum of care will return to the market next year. Surplus lead hazard reduction. We spent roughly $1/3 billion lining the pocket of the housing authority. Gone. You got lead paint? Well, shit, you got state and county, so it's a redundant system. Self-sufficiency programs. Unfortunately, they found that program to be redundant, minus 196 million. And then we're going to move on pathways to removing obstacles. That's considered DEI by this administration. So racial inequality issues and other factors that are being funded are gone. But they only defunded that by 100 million. Okay. That's negligible in its amount. Fair housing grants. And it looks like the target again will be of a racial nature across the board for probably non-Caucasians, since that would be the effect. That's going to be losing 60 million, negligible amount. It already has a lot of funding to start with. All right, so that, my friend, in total, it shows you one thing here. This is what's up. This is what's at stake for 2026. The 40% of cuts being slammed all over the news right now are negligible. They aren't directly related to a big chunk of money or anybody losing vouchers and so on. There are going to be cuts. The cuts are $26 billion on a $72 billion budget. Those cuts are specifically designed to get rid of those that are chronic in the system, getting a voucher and then keeping it 95 years. That's where the cuts mainly are affecting it. And other programs that don't directly put a voucher in the hands of a person, that's where it's being cut. Those that will be immune to these type of changes throughout this process and up to the point when Congress makes its decision will be those that are seniors and disabled. You will not, the amount you'll be affected by this through whether you apply, qualify, or even get it would be less than 2 or 3%, in my opinion, looking at this. Nowhere does in this report directly from the White House disclose that there's a 40% cut to vouchers. This is an invention of the news to manipulate how you view information. The 40% of cuts are all the programs in total here. So you see, you've been misled. And the report from the executive report directly from the White House indicates that. You see how the game's played here, people? So what I'm going to tell you is, yes, it will be a bit of a difficult market next year. Housing authorities will be a little bit more preferential about who they accept. There'll be less sensitivity for those that have that are considered other races, DEI programs, but what they're removing from it will not be sufficient enough to actually create a big problem. These are educational programs. We're spending a lot on that too. Frankly, I would rather house 1 million people than to discuss what's fair housing. If we're in such a dire situation with housing to start with. So the reality of all this, all the news, the report directly from the White House shows us only one thing, and that's that the cuts or the changes for next year are not going to be that big. A lot of people will not be affected by it. We will be able to resume housing through continuum of care and emergency housing vouchers and other programs. And the cuts they do make will likely be to jettison those of you that are simply low income but are not a senior and not disabled. So this is really just an ejection of people. And I don't really think that we're trying to get rid of people that aren't disabled or senior. I think what's happening here is we're trying to make it where those that are just simply low income and no other problem or issue, we're trying to make it where they're able to use a voucher, but for a limited term of 2 years. And of course, that could change as Congress makes its decision regarding that matter. So that's the whole story. For those of you out there panicking and having other issues, that's the information. That's the accuracy of what we know at this point. It's important to understand things can go up and down, and they can change, and certainly administration can change their opinions. We won't know the totality of everything and what's all totaled up and summed out of what's going to happen that year, but here's an indicator of what's happening. And it's not that it's a big change, but it doesn't affect the part that most of you would have imagined. Then the news made it seem like everybody's going to lose a voucher and it's going to be a big crisis. There's always a crisis with housing, but I think that it's important to understand, take the time and understanding to figure out for yourself and get the information directly from the source, the White House, before you go out and make important decisions or end up causing yourself mental health issues, just believing every news agency and all these big glorious these different advertisements they put out where everybody's trying to scare everybody. I know YouTube's full of that, and these people are not real consultants like me. They're entertainers with a microphone and an attitude. That does not qualify you, really, in my opinion, to be able to speak on any factor related to federal government or housing. We got lots of people that are house flippers that barely have a GED, but yet they're making and giving advice about federal programs. My advice to them is, unless you want 3 hots and a cot in a federal prison, then you probably want to delete your videos and get off YouTube. You don't have any business consulting anybody. Okay. And under this administration, I've seen people do much worse. Mr. Trump does not play at all. There are people sitting in foreign prisons right now. And, there's been discussions about whether or not they're going to make some additional changes that don't even warrant a cause for arrest. So I think we all need to be on our P's and Q's in terms of following the law and making sure that we verify the information that we're getting, that it's accurate, that we understand it the way that it was intended to be received. Okay. Well, our next video will be in approximately 24 hours. I'm going to try to cover more of the issue at play here, and we're going to continue to go on. Again, this channel will not be used as a political platform for comments, racism, or any other issue. If you say things that are inappropriate in this channel, I will put you out and I will block you forever, make a new channel, and I'll do it again. I'm not going to do that. We're just here to discuss what the White House has already published. All right, guys, I've enjoyed talking with you, and we'll see you in a couple of days, and hopefully I'll be in a more cheerful mood. This is sobering times. We just came out of a pandemic. Now we're dealing with new challenges, and if for a guy like me that's been in this field a long time, it takes on its a personality of its own, trying to deal with all these issues. But the good news is, I think 2026, despite setbacks, I think we're going to do really good that year. So you let me know what y'all think in the comments. If you're not haven't liked the channel or subscribed, please do. If you hate the channel, please hit the thumbs down and leave me a death threat. I always enjoy those. They go over very well. I like to have at least one of those with my morning coffee. Okay. All right, guys. I've enjoyed talking with you, and we will see you, I believe, in 24 to 48 hours. Bye.